So having the gift of your time today, as we always acknowledge in Rotary, because the greatest gift that all of us make is our time, and especially on a Sunday afternoon, it's Father's Day. I want to now hand over to what I hope will be a wonderful and exciting program for you all personally. And I want to finish just simply acknowledging the incredible work that our district leadership team, particularly the LEDS team, are doing in making all these changes to the way we deliver and talk about all the things that we do. We're here to celebrate Rotary this year. We're coming into our 100th year. This is a celebration of Rotary, and I'm looking forward to being part of this program today. So I'd like to hand back to Edith. Thank you, Edith, and your team. That's enough from me. So we'll get on with the show. Let's talk about it.
Go to Craig, thank you. 311, right on the button. Over to you, Becky. Slide 2.
Hi everyone, I'm Becky Giblin, the Rotaract Chair, and I want to just take a moment to remind you all that this is an interactive session, so we are encouraging you to unmute yourselves and join us and be a part of the conversation. Please also make use of the chat box, so you are able to pose questions and make comments in there, and that will be moderated by our LED team today. And and you'll be able to see in the left-hand corner of your screen, we have started recording this session. So I'll pass it back to Edith.
Ursula, thank you.
So welcome everybody. I'm just going to quickly go over the program just to introduce you to the first section. Well, the first part will be on youth protection, and that'll be really important in covering you know, how we can be facilitating responsible care for all these youth programs for the young people. That will be led by Hope. The second part of the program is going to be mainly led by Peter Ross, and he's going to go through all the secondary school level programs. Then we'll have part B of that section, and will be more the young adults programs, followed by a wrap session at the end. And we'd really like to have some of your feedback. So yeah, just before we go forward, just to really reiterate what Becky has said, we're really hoping that today's going to be as interactive as possible. So, you know, if you have questions, if you've got discussion points or comments on things, we'd like you to yeah, engage with us. Unmute yourself, that's fine. Put your hand up, raise your hand. We can see everybody's raised hand there. So if I could just get everyone to click a raised hand button so I can see that you can all do that.
Can't see. Where is it?
There's only 2 chat button. The reaction button is a clap or a thumbs up.
Reactions, Whānau, on the far right-hand side.
Yeah, but it's not a raised hand. It's a thumbs up or a clap.
Right. I'm having a bit of trouble with my mouse here, but... So we've got 2 people raising their hand at the moment. We've got a few reactions here. That's good. Okay.
It doesn't matter if we can get on with this.
Great. Cool. Sorry, who was that?
George.
George.
Oh, nice one, George.
Okay, great. So that's part of how we'll hope for you guys to engage with us, but there's also the chat group as well. So feel free to add comments. If you don't want to speak, please just, yeah, add comments in there for all to see. That would be great. So moving forward, I would like to just introduce Peter, who is briefly going to cover this next slide to give us a little bit of an overview. Thanks, Peter.
Okay, thanks very much, team. In this particular part of the presentation, I'm going to be talking about a number of district-led events focused entirely on secondary schools in our district. But before I start, I want to first acknowledge that we have a great team of program leaders in this district. And the way in which they apply themselves to the delivery they create excellent experiences for our young people. But I especially want to acknowledge in front of everybody here today the long-term commitment of John Overall, who has just recently retired as the chair of RIDA. And his contribution to Rotary has been extensive in expanding the RIDA program, and has also made collaborative efforts towards the opening up of Interact and a number of other school initiatives. And he's been doing this for over 30 years. Now, John is retired, and we really thank him very much. He's not here with us today, but I'm sure everybody would appreciate that. But I also want to thank Ian Willits for his leadership of the MUNA, the Model United Nations program that he's done over the last 3 years. He is stepping down, but his solidarity and reliability has made this a really outstanding program. And last but not least, when we talk about District 9920 and the youth and young adult programs, I have to emphasize the absolutely huge debt of gratitude that we owe to Aini Kwok for her untiring efforts in RIPEN, Interact, school relationships, the new Young Totara Award, and her leadership of young adults to take on the new challenges that are confronting us. And I'd also like to say that we are a team that has worked together for some time, and I'd like to thank you all for your contributions, not only to your own program, but to everybody else's program as well. That's how we work in this particular team. So back to the slide again now. When dealing with secondary schools, you will see on the top left there, relationships are key. The relationship between the Rotary Club and the school leadership is an absolutely key factor. If you don't have that, you've got nothing. And preferably, that relationship will be a continuous relationship with at least 2 key Rotarians who will take on the role and maintain the connection. This cannot be an annual passing of the baton, which we have typically in Rotary. We need passionate, we need focused and dedicated Rotarians to manage these relationships. Schools do not appreciate it if we change the person every year. And I guarantee that if we have those situations in place, we will have results that are amazing, because we've seen how that can be achieved. And that's the reason we published the booklet. Now, most of you should have had access to the booklet, and the booklet has all the detail of all the programs that we run. And the idea of the booklet is that you can actually take the booklet to the school and even print for them the specific programs that they are interested in. And then they've got all the detail. And you'll note on this slide, the district programs are down the right-hand side, starting with Rotary Youth Program of Enrichment and on further down. And some of those, and those are all the district-directed programs, and down the bottom left, headed by VIP Camp, are the club-directed programs. And so we're only talking about district-led programs today, but I can have a discussion about some of the club programs. And I think one of the examples of a club program which is particularly successful, but still remains with the club, is the one down there said Reading for Enrichment. And that is one between the Penrose Rotary Club and the One Tree Hill College. And they're trying to roll that out across a number of different schools now, and they are trying to cooperate with other Rotary clubs to do that. It's a particularly successful program, but it is club run. So I think that's really all I need to say. But just to be clear, that this presentation today is primarily around programs that are directed at secondary schools rather than primary schools. And I have to tell you, we have many, many primary schools in our district with some wonderful programs that are led by clubs. And we're here to encourage them and to try and make it as easy for them as possible. So that's all I need to say now. I'll hand it back to Ursula.
Thank you. Just before I introduce our next speaker, I just want to mention that we will have 2 tea breaks. That will be the first one at 5:15, and that will run for 5 minutes. And sorry, no, that was the second one. The first one will be at 3:50, and then the second one at 4:45. So that'll be a chance for you to stretch your legs And we're definitely planning to stick to time today. All right, so before I waste too much of that, we will go to Hope Horrocks, who is going to be presenting on our Rotary Youth Protection section, and she has recently stepped into the Youth Protection, what do you call that, Hope? Chair or Director, is it?
Officer.
Officer, that's the one. All right, so over to you.
Hi everyone. Some of this, if you've been involved, you know, you'll understand all of this. It'll all be quite, you've been done this before, but for others who are maybe just coming into programs, this is really, really important to get a deeper understanding of this, not just the prescriptive training that you do. So the first kind of question to really think about is why is youth protection important to Rotary? And the really key thing is safety for the youth that are involved in these programs. The goal of these programs is obviously for you guys is to advance these kids, to make sure that they are able to learn and grow and take something away from these programs that you guys are putting all of your time and effort into. So we want to make sure that when the programs are offered, that the kids are coming out better rather than being coming off worse. And for that, we need to make sure that they're not being harmed in any way when they're participating in the programs. So that's the first essential point, is we just want to make sure the kids are having a positive, safe experience. They're enjoying these programs. And you'll note there that I have expanded that idea not just to young persons, not just to persons under the age of 18, but also to vulnerable people as well. Certainly with some of these programs, you are dealing with people over the age of 18, but whether they're over that age or not, it's really important to understand what safety means when you're talking about someone that's vulnerable because of their age or because of other factors. So I'd like you to take a minute to well, not a full minute, but just take a bit of time to consider what might be some factors that might make a person vulnerable. So if anyone wants to contribute some options there about what might make a person vulnerable, good opportunity to give the chat a go.
Health. Any health issues?
Yep, that's a perfect example.
Yes.
Broken homes.
Broken homes, yeah, that's a great example as well. And those two examples right there, I like to break them down into internal factors and external factors when you're dealing with people. So internal factors might be someone's own mental well-being, it might be their physical health, something that you know, they're bringing personally into that situation. So as I said, Challenge Camp is a really great example of this. You do have people over the ages of 18, but they may be coming in with some personal disabilities that make them susceptible or vulnerable. And then the other option about broken homes, those are your external factors that you need to take into consideration when you're running these programs with these kids. What socioeconomic background are they coming from? What are they coming from a broken home? Are they coming from a potentially high stress situation?
Previous
because they're coming from overseas and they're going to be in an environment that they're not used to. These factors are really important because when you're considering someone's safety, how vulnerable that person is does impact whether or not they are susceptible to be victimized in these situations. So we want to make sure that, you know, we're doing everything we can to make sure the kids are safe, and ensuring that we're aware of their vulnerabilities and as much as we can when we're in that planning phase is really important. So the second, yeah, thanks Ursula, that's a really good point. Ursula just made a point of past instances of abuse. We all know, unfortunately, that if you are abused as a child, oftentimes you are open to abuse later in life as well. So that's a really good point. So the second reason why Rotary is important, which obviously takes a big step behind the kids' safety in itself, but is also the reputation of Rotary. We have seen, obviously, in the public, a number of organisations, whether you're talking about the Catholic Church or more private organisations, had severe reputational damage occur because of not having policies and procedures in place to properly handle the safety of the children in their care. Rotary has obviously taken this change of focus in recent years on board, and the training policy and the police checks and things that we have in place are really important, because Rotary can't do what we want to do. We can't provide these programs if the reputation of Rotary is damaged in this way. So the final point there is I've termed it risk management. So we want to also consider the risks that we are liable to when we are planning an event. Now, obviously, with a lot of these programs, you're working in with schools. As I said, there's been a focus in recent times to these uncovering these kind of broad procedure issues in organisations, and the governments have reacted to that, and they have been dealing with that fact. And the Vulnerable Children's Act 2014 was a big step towards making improvements in this way. So the schools have their own obligations, legal obligations, to comply with the Vulnerable Children's Act, and also, the Ministry of Education has very clear policies and procedures in place regarding children in their care and how to deal with these situations. And we just need to be very clear and aware of what those procedures are that the schools have put in place. We need to make sure that the volunteers that we're bringing on board are also aware of the school's policies and procedures, and that we're complying with them. And beyond that, there's other legislation that we should be considering when we're talking about risk management and protecting kids, and things like health and safety. So, any of the event spaces that you're working in with will have a health and safety policy, and it's really important to know what that health and safety policy is, to make sure that you are complying with that. So whether that's, working in with the event and the school, or just the event place that you're hosting, it's really important when you're in that, when you're considering a program and putting your structure in place to make sure it's a safe event, that you are aware of what other policies and procedures you need to comply with, and not just the Rotary ones as well. Okay, so we're just going to move to the next slide, I think, if anyone has any questions at this stage. Nope.
Has anybody got any points to make based on their own experience with some of these things?
I'd like to make just one point, that in the risk management side of it, that we somehow or another make it a lot more clear to presidents of our clubs that on behalf of the district governor, they have a responsibility to make sure all of these procedures are followed. And I'd like to make the further point that all people working with youth should really be doing that youth protection policy on the learning centre, and if not, we should be training them at district level if they can't, if they're not computer savvy. But I think the minimum of anybody attaching the Rotary brand to youth help in any way, shape or form, that we should all be damn well aware of our own youth protection policy.
Yeah, and that leads exactly into the next slide. So thanks for that.
Cool. Okay.
So yeah, so we've considered why it's important to Rotary. So now we're going into how do we ensure that we are protecting the youth that we are taking care of. And exactly that point you've just made, be familiar with the basics of the youth protection policy. The essential core points of that policy for anyone running an event should be something very well known to them. But any volunteer should at least be aware of the basics of the policy, and there should be the policy should be made easily aware and available to any volunteer who's working in with these programs. Yep, absolutely. So someone just made the comment about the influence of being under the influence when taking care of kids. Certainly, we need to consider with volunteers when we bring them on board the appropriateness of the volunteer, and we will go into that a bit on the different levels that I'm just about to discuss. But certainly the volunteers need to firstly be the right volunteers for the right situation, but when the volunteers are brought on board, they also need to be made very clear of their basic obligations when they're looking after children, and certainly alcohol consumption is something that would not be an appropriate thing to be doing while supervising children. So plan ahead. I think that the key thing with youth protection is the more awareness of keeping. So I've just lost my train of thought. Let's step back. So when you're planning these events, obviously there's a lot of details that need to go in there, and a lot of work and a lot of collaboration. And it's just really key when you're putting all of those moving parts and people together, that you're keeping youth protection as something in the back of your mind at all times while you're planning. And it's easier to do that when you're aware of the potential risks of each event. And we've got a really helpful guide there in terms of the risk levels that different events pose here. So your first level is an event where Rotary is not the primary organiser. So these might be some of those events where the school is running the event and Rotary is tying in with that school. In that case, the key thing for the volunteers who are working within that program to be aware of is actually not necessarily Rotary's policy. Yes, they should know the youth protection policy, but the key thing that they need to know is that organisers' policies and procedures. They need to make sure that they're complying with those. The second level is events where Rotary is the primary organiser, and it's not an event where children are going to be staying overnight. In that case, it's really important that every volunteer completes the training module. Rotary International has done a really good job of putting that module together, and that's certainly one of the reasons why today I'm not going to go through in detail what you should be doing, because every single person who's on this Zoom today should have gone through the training manual. And also, if it's been a while since you've done the module, go ahead and do it again. It's well worth, I find, it doesn't take a huge amount of time to do the module, and it's well worth having a refresh every once in a while. But every volunteer should be made aware of that module, and one of the things that I know people have been working very hard to collate those certificates together. My recommendation is, if you're planning an event, if you're one of the program organisers, and you go out and tell the volunteers, hey, this is the module that you need to do. We'll certainly get to that point as well. So yeah, if you're talking to any of the volunteers about doing that module, it's really great if you can also ask the volunteers to send through their completion certificate to you. And if you've got all the volunteer certificates, so you know they've all done it, that's great. That's a really good way to have been planned ahead. Welcome to send those certificates in an email through to the new email address for Youth Protect. And that way we have a central record at the district of all of those certificates. So you also know as a program organizer that you have you've put some security in place to make sure that every person that's going to be involved in that event has completed that module, and that there is a record on the district level of that being done. So yeah, there's also the forms again that every volunteer should complete. Yeah, really good question from Scott. Yes, if the volunteers are not Rotarians, they are still able to get access to that module, and they definitely should still complete it. The important point, which someone made the point here about making sure that children are aware of the policies and procedures that Rotary has in place. The key thing about making sure that every volunteer has done this module is making sure that everyone's on the same page when they're going to an event about what is required of them to ensure that the children are protected. And then making sure that that message is also conveyed to the kids, so that they know that there's a process in place to keep them safe. So yeah, if it is a non-Rotarian, absolutely they should still be doing the training module. So then the third level is where Rotary is a primary organizer, and it's also an overnight event. So these are your kind of overnight camps, site situations, also situations where we have exchange students. Those things would, where we've got volunteers taking care of exchange kids over a weekend or some such thing like that. All of those types of situations, we'd expect that those volunteers, Rotarian or non-Rotarian, had completed the training manual module, that they had been made aware of the youth protection policy. But then the other key thing is that they need to have a complete police check done. So each of these volunteers will need to get a police check. With the police checks, what needs to happen is the person who's organising that program needs to send the details through for the police check. So there is a form that gets completed, and there's also some identification requirements and some basic information that needs to be provided there. When that's when you've compiled that information from the volunteers, you send that through to, again, that email address there, youthprotect@rotarydistrict9920.org, and we'll undertake, the youth protection will undertake that police check and let you know if there was any issues coming through with that volunteer. If you have a police check, I'm not seeing the second part of that question.
It's valid for 3 years. So if you've had one done, just check if it's still valid.
Yeah, great point. Thank you. And that's again why we're trying to centralise this in the district, with having this one email address where these things go to, so that we can easily collate this information. And if you're unsure if you've got a valid police check in place, hopefully the way that we're now doing this going forward, we'll be able to say, yeah, we've done a police check previously on this person and it's still valid. And just bringing it back to that email address. It's a really interesting question. So someone's asked, I've got a valid police check for another organisation, not Rotary. Can I rely on that one?
No, you can't.
No. It's my understanding when any kind of police check is done, it's sent through by the organisation, and it's our responsibility, Rotary's responsibility, to make sure that police check is done. So we can't rely on another police check from another organisation. So it's kind of similar to, I know I've had police checks done for my work. It's quite common in law to have police checks done. They often need to, I need to do them again, even though I know that I currently have one valid with my current organisation. If I'm doing it for something else, for a different organisation, I'll need another police check done.
Likewise, if you work in finance.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons for that, correct me if I'm wrong, Hope, is because there are different levels of police checks. So for different reasons, those police checks can be more or less in depth, depending on why they're getting those checks done. So checks that might have been done for some organisations might have been at, like, you know, the base level, whereas another organisation for a different program who has, you know, more vulnerability or whatever the reason is, might be a different level police check. Is that right?
Absolutely, and because the purpose behind getting a police check is often, you know, quite different. So if you're getting an employment check, your employer just might want to know that you haven't, you know, got any criminal convictions. But for Rotary, we're doing a police check. Our purpose is to check that you don't have any history of things that might be of concern, specifically relating to youth. So police checks are needed for all volunteer students included, correct? Yeah, so someone's asked, police checks are required for all volunteers, including students. If you are, say, putting a child in a family situation, all family members who they're going to be with should have a police check. So yeah, student volunteers do fall under that. Anybody that is going to be around children where there's a risk that they might have a criminal past, you know, I'm not saying wouldn't need to do like a 5-year-old, but certainly, you know, if you're posting a child in a family where, you know, they've got teenagers of their own age and stuff, we'd expect the entire family to get that police check done, not just the parents. And the same thing, yeah. Oh, it's only over 18. Okay, cool. That's fine. Sorry, I'm getting multiple questions.
Okay, so let me help you there. So we've got one from Alan. Can we assume that past checks are stored and remained valid for 3 years? Well, the people, I'm assuming 3 years.
So it's 3 years. The point of us trying to centralize it to this one email address is so that we can collate that information and have them correctly stored. So yes, if it's after a 3-year period, or if you've gone and had a police check but you think it was a couple of years ago and you're not sure, I would just bear on the cautious side and get another check done. But hopefully going forward with us collating this information, we'll be able to tell you if the police check is still valid.
Okay, and we've got, thank you, we've got another one here from Crystal. With police checks, how recent do they have to be? So do you have to have one every 3 to 5 years, for example?
Yeah, you should certainly have a valid, anybody who's volunteering should have a valid police check. As I said, I would err on the side of caution with police checks. If a volunteer's had one done, you think in the last, you know, within the last 3 years, but you're of any concern as an organizer that it may not be still valid, or maybe circumstances have changed with that particular volunteer. Maybe there has been a comment made in the past regarding that volunteer. I would just always err on the side of caution and get another police check done.
Right. Any more questions from anyone before we? move on.
Just perhaps if I could just make a comment in terms of Alan's comment on storage of the police checks. It's a very, very good point, Alan. And we, at this point, we'll collect the police checks together. We have not finalized the new system because of the need to track any time that police check is accessed. So we will be storing them electronically with a single point of authorization until we get the new system with permissions, so that if there's a member, what you may need to do is, if someone's been on a program 2 years ago and you want to check their police check, you may need to get a confirmation that they're happy that the police check is disclosed. The same applies to the certificates on the Rotary International. It's a privacy issue, so those police checks are obtained for a specific purpose, and once they're stored, we're going to have both a very tight control of who gets access to those police checks, and also a method of actually determining how the individual is consulted, say 2 years down the track, as to their police check. So that's a quick update. And thank you, Alan, for the question on that.
Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide now. Thanks, Craig.
Great. So the training module, this one I'm not going into a huge amount of depth in here, because regarding the sensitivity or what you should do should an incident occur, is really guided by that module. And I presume most people or everybody has on the Zoom call has already done it. But this is where the youth, at the first instance, when the event starts, youth who are attending the program need to be made sure that they are aware that those policies are in place, that they can come and talk to someone if they feel like an incident has occurred or if they feel uncomfortable in any way, and that, you know, you're wanting to make sure that from the offset they are aware that Rotary is doing everything on their part to make sure it's a safe environment for those children. Right, then the avoid one-on-one contact wherever practical. So the rule of three, if you are in any kind of situation, or the volunteers in any kind of situation where they might be one-on-one with a youth or someone who is a vulnerable person, that's why I do say, I know the child protection policy is written and within the mindset of under 18s, but you know, it should be more, it should be guidance a bit there in terms of common sense, that also if you're dealing with a vulnerable person, you want to be keeping these rules in place as well. So yeah, if there's a situation where a volunteer may be one-on-one with a youth or a vulnerable person, then the volunteers should be trained that they should be made, I want to use the word train, they should know it's common practice to, you know, bring another volunteer along, bring someone else into that situation, so that they're not putting themselves or the children in a potentially compromising position. If an incident does occur, God forbid, as I'm sure none of us would dream or wish that we have an incident in any of these programs, but should an incident occur, we need to respond appropriately. Now, take it seriously. I'm going to say something as someone who's relatively young myself, but certainly not of this generation, that we are now seeing coming up. They have, you know, I don't know if you guys know the term cancel culture or being woke or being called out, but certainly this age group nowadays has been very, very made aware of their rights in terms of their own safety and being able to call out on that. And that may mean that you get the odd incident which sounds a bit frivolous or not serious. A child might sound overly sensitive to a situation. It doesn't matter. It should still be taken seriously from the moment it's brought forward in regards to an incident. And also, it's not just obviously the children that can bring an incident forward. Other volunteers, see something, speak out. If something doesn't seem like it's right, then something should be said. When something is said, the first point of call is to let the person who's organised the event know. So if that's a Rotarian, obviously we have our own procedures in place, but it's really, really key that if we're working in with a school, that the school is made aware as soon as possible of the incident, so that they can handle it in the way that they have the processes that they have in place to handle a situation when it comes forward. If in any doubt, contact one of the YPOs for assistance. So we obviously do have ways, different people who can be contacted on that. That's also another one of the reasons why we put that Youth Protection email in place. We want that Youth Protect email to be really readily available to people, so that you can not only send through your police checks, so that you can send through your certificates, so you can ask queries when you're planning, if you have any concerns, but also to have a point of call when an incident occurs and you're not sure, and that there is an email address there as well, so that if the situation seems like it wasn't something, or it's after the event and someone's had a think on something and they said, oh, actually something didn't seem quite right there, that you have that email address to reach out to.
We've got, in emergencies, do we call the YPO by phone? Is the contact details readily available?
I haven't made my mobile number available. I'm not sure about things on the club level, but certainly I'm willing to make my mobile available to anybody, should that be of concern. I think, Craig, if you're still around, you also talked about having another party come involved with me, so it won't just be me. Is he still here?
Yes. No, absolutely. So at the end of the day, if it's anything other than a trivial matter, it needs to be advised to the YPOs and the DG. And the default rule is that the police are advised. Now, this is controversial in Rotary, but that is actually the default rule in Rotary International policy. Now, clearly, there's going to be circumstances where the police are just not going to be interested. But that's the reason why we've now strengthening the YPO team to have a sworn officer as well as part of the team. And of course, we've got a DGN who's previously been a sworn officer. So probably I'd just say, oh, well, toss it to Alan because he can deal with it. So anyway, it's again, if in doubt, escalate, because it can't be left, and we can't investigate. Escalate, not investigate, right?
Yeah. So Ainsley's just made a really good point that this is part of your planning stage, that you should have those contact numbers specific to the event in place beforehand. Is a really, really great call, Ainsley. I think, yeah, if you're at the point that you feel like you need to contact someone verbally, if it feels like it's something potentially serious, then yes, call the police. But if it's just a procedure question about, we're not sure, we haven't done this policy before, certainly that should be in your planning stage, just making sure that if you have questions about how to proceed in the handling of the matter. Thank you. John's just said my cell phone number is available on Club Runner. Right. I haven't changed my phone number since I was 11, so it should definitely be the right one for this specific purpose. I just can't be bothered people not being able to know what my number is. So yeah, if you have any questions about how to proceed with it, handling an incident, certainly make sure that you've just got those contact numbers in place beforehand. But if it's something about the actual incident itself and you're concerned over the incident, contact the police. So yeah, that's the next part on this. Advice of the YPO: contact the police. So if you've had an incident, you've contacted YPO, or you're considering yourself that it's quite serious, your next point of call should be to contact the police. And as Craig said, it obviously matters to the child, but it doesn't matter to Rotary as to, you know, how the police proceed once we've contacted them. The really important thing is to just have done the right thing in contacting them in the first place. Next point is to treat complainant and victim sensitively. This kind of goes back to my first point about children of this generation have been made very aware of you know, it's much more than the 80s stranger danger. And so when it comes to kids, it's very important that they are, no matter how frivolous it seems, or on the other end how serious it is, the very first thing is just to make sure that the kids feel that they are in a safe environment post whatever the traumatic incident was. So to make sure a kid feels that they are now in a safe environment, we need to treat them very delicately. Don't ask questions, don't make kind of any opinion comments. It should be letting the child speak as much as they feel comfortable speaking to you, but not to make them feel like they are being investigated in any way.
There's also, yeah, just if I can jump in there, there's potential to contaminate evidence at this point. So it's also really important not to ask
leading questions.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I was actually, so I'm not in the Crown prosecution, but that is where the firm that I work at. And we were having a deep discussion actually on Friday at work about just that fact of witness statements and how unreliable people's memories are, especially vulnerable people, especially people that are in traumatic incidences. Their memory is quite faulty. And so when an incident occurs, the last thing you want to do is to be potentially muddying that memory of the incident for them. You want to keep as much away from that as possible, because we're not trained to handle that. None of the volunteers, none of the program people are really trained to be able to ask questions in the right way to make sure that they're getting the facts as close as possible to what actually happened. Yeah, thank you. So that's kind of it for me. If anyone has any other questions or comments, you're welcome to ask. Also, I'll be around if there's parts specific to different programs as you're going forward that you want to come back to me. I'll be here in the background.
Fabulous. Thank you, Hope. That's awesome. I hope that's generated a bit of thought for everybody. And again, if questions pop up about youth protection, please just feel free to chuck them on the chat there, and we can come back and address them as we go forward. If any of this has raised any queries for you, or even if you have your own example, which might be useful to bring up, that's what we encourage as well. Now, the next thing we're going to do is go to a tea break. But just before that, I wanted to mention that this youth protection stuff is obviously going to be picked up upon all the other slides that Peter will be doing with regards to the specific programs. So again, if you have any questions on this youth protection stuff, then there'll be more instances as we go forward to ask about that. So let's head to a tea break, and the time is 4 o'clock, but we will give us maybe, what should we say, Edith, 5-minute break? 5 minutes, she's got her hand up. Cool, so guys, feel free to go and have, stretch your legs, and we'll just leave this slide up. You don't have to turn your screens off, or just, turn your videos off if you want, and your sound should already be probably on mute. And yeah, come back to us in 5 minutes time. Thanks, guys. Right, okay. Here we go. Okay, so just wanting to introduce and kickstart the next section of the program, which will be focusing on those secondary youth programs, which Peter Ross will lead. So we have a number of programs which we're going to be talking about today, which Peter will be referring to. Some of these ones which have just been thrown up here on the screen. And I wanted to ask if any of you have attended at least one of these programs, if you can give a raised hand or pop into the chat room, whether any of these is something that you have attended. John, you've got your hand going. Good one. Hugh, I can see that. Irina, nice. Alan, cool. Supported but not attended. Great. Frank, Johnny, Lisa. What else have we got on this next screen? Beryl. Cool. So for those of you who have attended one of these programs, it'd be really nice if you have a special memory or something that you can kind of just comment on as to why this program had maybe been important to you in your life at that time. If anyone has anything that they could share, just to acknowledge how, these programs are actually, they're here at a certain point in a person's life that's really fundamental to their development, really, and empowering them. So yeah, if you've got something that you can speak of. Becky, yes, she said as a team leader. Yeah. So yeah, just if anybody wants to unmute themselves and give an example.
If no one's going to jump in, I'll jump in quickly and say that last year for me, with the Rotaractors and the RILA alumni running RIPEN for the first time, and actively getting in there as all the team leaders, was a really incredible weekend for all of us. We got to use the alumni and Rotaract teams together, which created a really great environment, and we had a whole lot of fun with that. And I think our team leaders may have ended up more competitive than the kids in that one. So it was a great experience to be with all of them.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and I guess just for myself, I attended the Rotary Youth Exchange. I spent a year in Denmark when I was 18, and because of that particular point in my life, being a teenager and that being a real turning point, yeah, I feel like that has had a huge impact into how I've developed in terms of my personality and my values. So yeah, really pivotal some of these programs are into people's lives. So that's how I just wanted to open up this section, just to kind of speak to the meaningfulness of what these programs actually represent for people. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Peter.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, as we described earlier on, these programs are all focused on secondary schools. So the first program I'm going to talk about is RIPEN. And there's a question here, what's in it for the teenagers? But before I go on to the questions, I'm just going to put a few things in perspective, just so you're all clear. This is a 2-night program. It takes place next year, Friday, March the 26th, at Kakako Lodge in Hunua. So it's 2 nights, a Friday night and a Saturday night. It's a school camp effectively, but with a difference in that there's a whole lot of people from different schools, and it's years 11 to 12. Becky touched on one of the major significant changes that's taken place in recent years with this particular program is Ione Kwok and George Wilson have gone to a lot of trouble to bring in groups of Rylearian alumni and Rotaractors, some of whom are actually the same, to manage the whole process. This is a key strategy for our district now, is to bring those young people in to manage the on-the-ground stuff. It's all basically based around the fact that Rotarians are getting older and cannot do the heavy lifting anymore, so we need the young people to do all that and to gain the leadership experience that they will from that exposure. It's also worth noting at this point, but I will cover it in more detail later, that RIPEN is in that way inextricably linked to RILA, so that the two go back and forth all the way. So I just end on that by saying, you know, does anybody have any comment on what they think is in it for the teenagers? And the people who've had experience of this, both as Rotarians who've sent people on it, do they have any input as to what they think has been in it for the teenagers? So I'm going to be quiet now while you all give me the answers to that question. How am I doing, Edith?
Great.
Opportunities, like you said, opportunities for leadership.
That's that's very true, actually, and you see that particularly, and some of them have been on that as leaders will recall seeing some of them on the top of the high ropes, encouraging other people to jump off the high ropes, which is somewhat challenging for a number of them who go to the exercise. And I'd also note that there's a lot in it for the Rylearians and Rotaractors who run it as well, because they love to jump off the high ropes themselves. I have to tell you that. Anyway, sorry, Becky.
No, I think one of the things that we got to see was for a lot of the high school kids coming into a space with kids who they aren't familiar with, and then having to learn to build up a trust level with them when they're going to do things like the high ropes, and knowing that they're the ones that are going to be holding on to the different ropes and being responsible for their safety. There's a level of trust that was built, and it was an interesting experience to see some of the kids who weren't overly confident matched with kids who were extremely confident, and the learning that they get off each other in those stressful situations for them was really intense, and they build really fast bonds of that 2-night period.
Sure.
So I think that was really
I think one of the things that I would go back and emphasize, Becky, is that because this is a school camp, but nobody's from the same school, it puts everybody in a completely different space. School camps, where they're all from the same school, become rather introverted exercises. This is a totally out there exercise, much more challenging than simply jumping off high ropes, because you, like you said, you've got to get to know new people from new schools, from other types of schools as well. So it can be quite challenging for some, but that's the benefit. Sorry, Edith.
She wasn't meant to talk. She thought she was on mute.
Okay, I'll just go on a little bit and just to the next slide, if I may.
Sorry. So so we've got that. Those are some of the bullet points. Have we covered most of those there, Peter?
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then the next question is, what's in it for you and Rotary?
Well, what's in it for Rotary? I mean, has anybody got any particular comment there? Because I'm going to have to move this along, otherwise I'm going to run out of time. I've got to make up some time as we go. So,
we've got some people that have, well, Steve and Edith have said that they've been camp mum and dad for RIPEN and had an amazing experience. And we've got George, who's mentioned, great to see cross-pollination across the full socio-economic mix.
Yep, totally agree with that.
Comment. We've got America saying builds the connection between Rotary and future leaders. So those are really new insights for Rotary from a younger perspective. That's another really great.
That's very true. I think the other thing it does is it builds a relationship between the Rotary and the schools as well. So that when the schools have sent somebody, we've got a link back into the school. And remember that first slide, it's all about relationships with the school. So you've got to use those relationships to build stronger relationships.
Yep, and then there's a couple of questions here just on RIPEN for you, Peter. There's one about who was that about? Oh yeah, who decides which students are selected for programs such as student exchange, rider, or the schools or the clubs? So you can answer that one whenever you want.
I'll deal with that separately because it's different for each program. For RIPEN, it's decided by the schools largely. The Rotarians don't do any selection process in that exercise, not in this case. Some of the others are all a bit different, so I'll move on. And
for RIPEN, for RIPEN, the school select the students, and Steve, there is a Facebook called RIPEN Auckland 9920. It's been going since 2017, and it's one of the active RIPEN Facebook page. It's for all RIPEN students that have been there.
Yes.
RIPEN is what's in it for you and Rotary. Like Peter said, it's a connection between the school and Rotary. And out of RIPEN, we have a lot of interest for students wanting to do youth exchange and interact clubs.
Yeah.
Okay, and we've got a couple of just later points there about people keeping in touch with each other and how there have been people participating in the 90s and they still keep in contact with a lot of the people they engage with. So, okay, next slide.
Okay. Okay, so this one here is really more of a procedural exercise than not. What do the Rotary clubs and Rotarians need to do? And this is what we're trying to spell out for them here. Consider sponsorship for those people that may be disadvantaged. That's a key part of the equation. We try to go and get to schools that are disadvantaged, schools that don't have camps and people that can't go on camps. There's the budget figure there. And basically, the other challenge that we have as a district-led exercise is the communication. Clubs need to nominate somebody who's going to be the person who is responsible for this and get in touch and make sure they're constantly in touch with the RIPEN organisers. It's particularly challenging if they don't, because we don't know what they've done, what they've got coming, and right up to the last minute, Aini is trying to cut off. And in fact, she's quite ruthless now, the way she'll cut off if the people don't get all their stuff in on time, because otherwise it just drags on for too long. And so the commitment to communication is key.
We do RIPEN online now. We don't take manual paperwork just to save the environment. And also it means all the information is 99% accurate.
Thanks, Aini. Okay, so if we just move to the bottom part of that slide, you'll see there's a piece there in yellow. And this is where I'm trying to link up a little bit with the stories and the issues around the youth protection. Because for most of the people that are involved in clubs, in putting people onto RIPEN, there is no connection with the actual program itself. So there is actually normally no requirement for the youth protection exercises involved. However, if you're going to go to Kakako Lodge as a Rotarian or a Rilarian, these are the things you have to complete down the bottom there. And it's quite conceivable that at some point Hope may in fact ramp that up, but that's the basics that are required at the moment. George, have you got any comment you want to make on that?
No, that's fine. I'm not sure about it, what non-negative police check means, but I'm sure it means that you need to get a police check.
Okay, we'll go with the police check then. We'll take out the non-negative. Okay. All right, any other comments about RIPEN?
I think just getting a police check, it's got to be a positive police check. If it comes up with anything, then you're not allowed to be part of the volunteering, are you?
I think you'll find, I think you'll find, John, that what police do is they give you a report which they say, which is a negative report. In other words, there is nothing to report.
Yes, I know. If there is something to report, then you can't be a volunteer.
That's right. Yep. Okay. Can I move on?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to go now to the Model United Nations Assembly, otherwise known as MUNA. And now, the first thing I want to start off with on this one is that this is a signature event for Rotary, and it's a signature event for our district. And in this particular case, we run the Moona for districts 9910 and 9920. It's always run at the Auckland Girls Grammar Dorothy Winston Centre. It's run as it will be from here on run as a district program. Earlier on, there was some comment about some clubs that are running programs, and up till now, it's been run by Auckland East through Ian Willits. But going forward, it's going to be a district program, which will be run by a district team. So it's not particularly club specific. But we will be dragging people in from different clubs to help with the exercise. In this case, schools submit teams of 4, and the school, that particular team is allocated to a country. And in the picture there, you'll see them all dressed up, because they all come dressed up in the various attire that they expect is what would be typical for the country they're representing. And for 2 days, they closely emulate the United Nations Debating Chamber, and they represent the country that they've been nominated to do so. And that can get into some quite heated debates about all sorts of things about climate change and how climate change is going to affect global warming, and how that's going to affect the tide coming in on various low-lying islands, etc. Those are ones I've seen in the past. So that's basically the Moona exercise. So my next slide is, I've got some questions for you all. Has your club ever engaged with students that have attended Moona? And that's an interesting question. Have you had them back to your club after they've attended Moona? Because, and this is an interesting one, most clubs have nothing to do with the selection of, or in fact all clubs have nothing to do with the selection of the team that goes. So the school you're involved in will select the team, and quite often from the debating group, and they will go along. And so the first you will know is when the school perhaps tells you who went on their team. And you do have the opportunity, of course, to invite them back, but I'm interested to know who has done that.
Okay, show of hands. Craig, you've got your hand raised, but I'm wondering if you're meant to do that. Anybody on? I've got Frank. What is the age group for Moona? We've got a question there. 12 to 13 is the answer from Ainsley. Thanks, Ainsley.
No, Moona is Moona is a bit different to that.
Sorry, year 12 to 13, is it?
Yeah, year 12 to 13. That sounds right.
Sorry. So we have nobody that has saying that they have ever engaged with students who have attended Moona so far, Peter.
Okay, now this is interesting, because Moona was one of the programs which I think is quite an outstanding program, which has one of the lowest attendances of Rotarians who go along to check it out. It's not easy, to be perfectly honest. To get parking up near Auckland Girls Grammar is a bit of a challenge, but I can tell you that if you were to turn up there for about an hour on a Saturday to listen to part of the debate, you will be quite impressed with the standard of debate and the standard of activity that is taking place in this auditorium. And therefore, the benefit to Rotary of supporting Moona gets somewhat lost. When the children turn up at Moona, there is lots of signage around about Rotary, but if you were to ask them some days later what they'd attended and what was Rotary's involvement, my suspicion is that they would have a very low appreciation of Rotary's involvement in the exercise. And therefore, I believe that we need to get more engaged as Rotarians, not for long periods of time, not necessarily to do anything, but to observe, and then to actually encourage the school to perhaps send somebody, not even the whole team, back from their Moona team to come to your Rotary Club and tell you what they've been engaged in. We just have to do a little bit more on what I'll call the engagement post-event. Any comments?
We have a couple of comments here. Is it only for New Zealand?
Okay, no, it's not only for New Zealand. You will find there's a few, I see some comment there from America about Moona in Fiji, and it may not have been Rotary sponsored. That's correct, because Moona is a short form word which is often applied to other model United Nations as well. But so this is the Rotary Moona that we're talking about.
Okay, because yeah, one was in Fiji, but
yeah, that's fine. I understand that.
What is the cost we've got there as well?
The cost is, I have the cost down here. It's $250 per team.
Brilliant. we've got, yeah, a comment from Edith saying a great opportunity to perhaps be present at this event, and yes, to get the team back to the Rotary Club to, you know, talk about their experience there.
Okay, one point I would make there, Edith, that's it, you're absolutely right. And it's particularly relevant when some clubs decide they want to have a debating competition with some of their schools and so on, because these are the young people who are often from the debating group in the school. So if you want to connect with that, that's one of the ways to connect into that particular cadre of people at the school. Okay.
Okay, and then just a comment from Steve asking whether he sort of thought it was the geography, head of geography, that selected the teams. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I think that's correct, but they often do tend to be the debaters.
Okay. Steve, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to make a comment there about something about how to get into schools at the head of department level.
Okay, how to get into schools at the head of department level. Well, that's one of the challenges. That's about building the relationships. And
do you want me to answer that?
Okay, yes, Aini, what a good person to answer that question. Way to go.
Okay, how do you get into schools? The easiest way is through RIPEN. Once you get them into RIPEN, you form a relationship and you start going to schools and start talking to them. And before you know it, the students are interested in forming an Interact Club. And from there, you introduce your science forum, which is another easy product. I like to call it a product from Rotary to introduce to schools. How do I get into 3 schools? In Aurora, De La Salle, and Sir Edmund Hillary, all through just talking to them. And that's how you do it. You get into schools and you form a connection, and you meet the head of department, you meet the principals. That's how you do it.
Great. Thank you.
Just had a question there, but what about through the Interact board? Now that begs the question that an Interact already exists, because in many of these schools, Interact does not already exist. Aini.
Yeah, correct. The Interact board don't exist. So what happened is, it's like, for example, take for example, Aurora College or James Cook High. Okay, Rotary had never had any connection. We invited them first to the science forum, and then from then on, I formed a good relationship with the principals and the senior management team. And so this year, we invited them to RIPEN. They were coming, but RIPEN didn't eventuate, but they are coming back. And I've got to interview the students to get them to select students to go to the science forum next year. So
thanks, Aini. Thank you very much. Okay, shall we just keep moving on here, Ursula? I think otherwise we're going to lose some time.
Sure, we might have already covered some of these questions. What is the benefit to Rotary for supporting Moona?
It gets us better linkage with the club, the school.
Okay. Have your club members ever attended Moona, and what do they think about it?
The answer to that is mostly 0. I'll tell you that right. Yeah, the dog agreed with that too. Okay, so what do you as Rotarians and clubs need to do? You need to contact the secondary schools, just exactly what Aini was saying, budget for that, and liaise with the Moona organising team. Make sure that you are in constant liaison. Once again, it requires a dedicated Rotarian from your club to be in the loop between the school and the Moona organising team. Okay?
And we've just got a yellow box down there around the youth protection stuff. So if anyone has any questions about Moona, feel free to post them on the chat. I'm just going to go to the next slide.
Can I one before you go?
Yeah.
Just going back to Hope's slides originally. This is an event which is organised by Rotary cooperatively with Auckland Girls Grammar. So it has some aspects of Auckland Girls Grammar's requirements in there, but it's not their event. It's our event, not theirs. They actually provide us with what you'd call a dry location. In other words, we have to put everything into the location, the food and the people and everything. So it's where it becomes a bit more of a collaborative exercise between us and Auckland Girls Grammar. So this is one of the areas that we may need to look at as far as youth protection goes, but happy to do that. Thanks very much. Okay, so the question for everybody there is, for those of you who know, can you tell me how is RIDA different from all the other programs that we run for youth? And you're not allowed to answer, George.
So has anybody ever had experience with attending RIDA or know generally what it's about?
Okay, well, if they have, for the purposes of moving on, I will give you what I think is the position of that answer.
Mm-hmm.
This program is the one program we have which is designed specifically to save lives. That's what this program is designed to do. We're looking to save young people's lives by getting them to be much more conscious of safety on the road. I'm just going to give you a bit of background about this as well. This program was started in Australia and many years ago, and over the years has moved to New Zealand. And fundamentally, I have to say that our district, and you guys wouldn't necessarily be aware of this, all of you, but our district have done an excellent job of running this. In fact, to the point where they are now recognised, or have recently been recognised, as the top performing Rotary Rider Committee in New Zealand because of the expansion that they've done. So I really take my hat off to them, because this is not an easy program to sell to a school, because it does involve taking the children out of school for a whole day to go somewhere to go through the program. And the program is excellent, I have to tell you, but it is also quite time consuming for some schools who have a very high focus on their academic programs. And having said that, one of the schools that always sends a large contingent to RIDA is St Cuthbert's College. Now, they have a big focus on academic excellence and academic devotion. And so for them to do it, it almost begs the question why other schools can't do the same thing. But that's easier said than done. So that's the focus on RIDA. Now, just ask George if there's anything you'd like to add on RIDA, George.
Well, only that I probably differ a little bit for the compliance side of RIDA, because it's really organised by Road Safety Education, and we are simply stewards on the day. And whilst I'm a real advocate for all Rotarians to go through the compliance with our, our training requirements on the RI website, I think that's a minimum requirement we should be doing. I don't think we have to be police vet checked for it, but we do need to sign in at the beginning of the day to RSC requirements. And by that means we're operating under their umbrella.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those programs where we really don't want Rotarians to be there that haven't been, who are not familiar with our youth protection program.
I agree.
Because I guess my answer to that is that my reason for that is that the Rotarians themselves are at risk rather than the kids in many respects.
Sure. Okay. Any more comments on that one at all?
We've had Beanie volunteered for one, and that was at, is it Pack Rugby Club? Yeah. And there was just a question, yeah, about where it was. So yeah, that's about that. Did you want to touch on any more, Peter or George, on the youth protection section?
Well, I think the interesting thing about that is, George, I think it's probably worthwhile you getting together with Hope on this to make sure you understand and set the tone of what it is. Now, maybe I've been a bit heavy-handed here, and I'd be very happy for you and Hope to come up with the answer that you think is appropriate for those who are engaged on the day. I think it's also worth noting that that's one of the requirements of the Rotary clubs. We need a few volunteers on the day, not very many, probably half a dozen will do. But that's quite an experience, actually. In fact, I can tell you now that if you haven't been to a RIDA session, you will find it particularly beneficial. It's very interesting. The speakers involve people like the police. We've even have an accident victim, a young lady who was in an accident many, many years ago, and she tells them her story. And her story is pretty harrowing, frankly. So it's a very interesting exercise, and I do commend it to any Rotarians that have the time to attend. You don't have to attend all the time, the whole day. I've been on numerous occasions, but never for the whole day, I don't think. I think they probably kicked me out after a while. So anyway, so I think that's all we need to say on that one. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, sorry if I just come in on the police check thing. Peter, are people in the car following kind of the 3-person rule, or do you have?
No, there's no people in the car. There's no people. They don't get in a car at all. It's not a driving exercise. It's a lecturing exercise. The people who come to it from the schools always turn up by bus, and they're chaperoned by their teachers. So there's none of that. No.
Okay, so I think in that case, sorry, I was just trying to clarify whether they were doing any actual practical driving where they might be one-on-one with a, it's just them and a Rotarian in the car. But no, I think under that case, a police check is not required.
Okay,
it's not
thanks
an
very
overnight
much.
stay, and you're able to abide by the minimum 3 people rule.
Sure. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so we now move on to the Rotary National Science and Technology Forum. Now, this is, without a doubt, very much a signature event for Rotary in New Zealand, because this is the National Science and Technology Forum. So it's the only event that I'm aware of in the youth space that actually covers all of New Zealand, schools from all over New Zealand. So the question down the bottom is, how many clubs have contributed to the Science and Technology Forum in the past?
Oh, we've got Irina's put a hand up, George, Hugh, Edith, Craig. Cool, quite a few there, Peter.
Okay, well, that's good. It's good. Let me just go through a little bit of background for it. It's all about Year 12 students from all over New Zealand. Its dates, we hope, in 2021 will be 10th to the 23rd of January. It's actually sometimes, before you go to that slide, just wait for a minute. It's sometimes referred to by the people who come on this campus forum as Geek Camp. It's interesting, really, because I've been to a number of functions to do with the forum, and I've sat next to young people from all over New Zealand. And I have to tell you, I sat next to a young bloke from Invercargill one time, and he was telling me how impressed he was when he turned up at this event, and he found there were 159 people just like him, because at his school in Invercargill, he was the only geek. So he discovered himself, and he found that he really just blossomed in this environment. So it's it really is a very highly developmental exercise where these young people, very, very smart people, develop much better focus on what their future career will be. So as I said, there's over 160 participants. They stay in the halls of residence in the University of Auckland or around there. And I must also say that at one graduation dinner, I sat next to a young man who had come from Queenstown, and he was excited about the whole exercise. He was just fizzing. And he even went right over the top at the end of the evening, because he won one of the prizes, which meant that he got a trip to London to the international forum. And so this is on a grand scale, I have to tell you. And there are many people, many older people around New Zealand, it's been going for a long time, this one, who will quite often tell you, oh yes, I remember Rotary, I went on the Science and Technology Forum. In fact, we had a representation, I think it was from Nikki Kay not so long ago, and she said exactly that. We've had it on numerous occasions. So this one is the one that Aini was talking about, that she takes to schools, because most schools have heard about this. Most schools want their science and technology geeks, so to speak, to go on this exercise, because it really is a very big deal. So I'll take the next slide now, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, so this is not hugely different from the last slide about some of the other ones, Myrna, etc. The budget in this particular case is a lot higher, of course. It's $1,895 per student. And I would say that there are many different ways that people pay for this. Some people do a 50-50 deal with the student, and sometimes the school pays a bit towards it, the exercise as well. There is no hard and fast rule. But I will say that the ones that Aini is talking to now, which I'm supporting considerably, is she's doing 3 low decile schools in South Auckland, and they will not have any money. So we will go to some of the trusts to fund those their participation. And we were very hopeful that we'll get 1 student from each of those schools, Aorere, De La Salle, and what was the last one, Aini? Is it James? It's Edmund Hillary. Edmund Hillary, that's right. And we believe that's a good way for us to connect. Anybody got any comments?
We've got a comment from Lisa. I hope they have changed the method of payment. Yeah.
Okay. Now that's interesting, Lisa, because although this is a grand program and it's been very, very successful over the years, they have had quite a long history of antiquated systems. So your comment does not surprise me one little bit, but I am aware that they are in fact upgrading all their systems and upgrading their processes from paper to online. But Peter Buchanan, I think you're on here somewhere. Would you like to comment on the process at the moment?
Sure. You were right that it's been going for 32 years, and for 15 or 16 of those years it was run by Peter Best. He did an amazing job, but over that time the organising committee really kept it it worked, and so they kept it as it was. This year, I guess we have the organising group, which I'm not part of, have actually have arranged for there to be the application forms, and that have been sent online to the schools, and also I think they've been sent online to the clubs as well. So clubs get a set of files, and the schools also get a set of files. They're different because they're aimed at different points in the process of basically encouraging students to put themselves forward from the school to then be interviewed by the Rotarians from the club associated with that school. And then, as Peter said, there's a selection process where we are aiming to really get maximum participation by schools, so that I would say, from my perspective anyway, as district coordinator, that any school that applies should get that student in, at least 1 student, unless there's some major problem with that, because typically low decile schools have been underrepresented in the past, and it's really important that we get more Maori and Pacifica enthused about science and considering it as a career. So we're very, very, I am very, very determined to take advantage of the initiatives that Aini and others are taking to contact these low decile schools and to hope that they can participate.
Lovely, thanks, Peter. Okay, oh, sorry.
Peter, this is a opportunity for clubs to invest into young people who will determine the future of New Zealand. I can't say that highly enough. The students we've had speak at our club have travelled from Auckland to Wellington to London to Zurich, and now they are tutorers at these events as well. They're fantastic young people, well worth the investment.
It's also a great credit to the organisers that one of our sponsor students from our club actually did go to London, but he returned having had a fantastic experience, but actually feeling that the New Zealand event was superior to the London event. So the quality of what the organising group behind this science forum do is really top notch.
Great. Okay, thanks guys. We're going to have to keep moving on, are we not, Ursula?
Yes, that's true. Lovely.
Okay. All right, we're going to talk about Rotary Youth Exchange for the moment. Now, first and foremost, this is quite a brief exercise really because it's on hold for 2021. Nobody will be surprised about that. This program has been suspended globally right through to the end of this Rotary year. It's for ages 15 to 18. But the point is, though, that even though it's been put off for this year, there is a plan to get it restarted again in the 2021-2022 year. But to do that, and this is important that clubs recognise that, selection process for the 2022 year will start in April 2021. So just because we're not sending people at the moment doesn't mean to say we're not finding people at the moment. So we need to get out there as Rotary clubs. We need to talk to the schools that we know, and we need to continue to promote RYE and identify students for the January 2022 departure, but focusing on a target date of April 21. Now, I do suggest that anybody who's got questions about this program, they should be directed to either Tracy Faber or John Fothergill. And I don't really have any much more to say about it than that. Because there's so much up in the air at the moment, so I won't spend any more time on that if that's okay. Any comment?
Well, my only comment to that is that this is the program that requires all of the safety protocols of youth protection, with no discussion at all. Everybody has to be, it's a full Monty, if I could put it that way. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, George.
Especially those who are host families, right?
Absolutely.
I have had some really interesting examples of where, when I did youth exchange, the police check, at least in Denmark, wasn't happening at that point, and have had, fellow students from Australia living with like people that really should not have been host families under investigation, would have totally been wiped out as a host family had they had a police check. So glad that's kicked in.
Sure. Okay, can we move on?
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to that one. Actually, before you do that, I'm not sure, we've lost the challenge camp one. Just go back to the RYE for a minute, and I'll just talk a little briefly about challenge camp. For some of you, some of you may or may not be aware, there is an event called Challenge Camp. Now, Challenge Camp is an event which is actually run by a club in 9910, but it's also run for 9920 at the same time. Now, Challenge Camp is very strongly linked to Rotary Youth Exchange, because the mentors that look after the disabled people on that camp come from the RYE program. And the interesting thing about that is that many people will tell me that the most outstanding or the highlight of the RYE students' year in New Zealand is quite often said to be the Challenge Camp experience. And so it also involves all the RYE students from 9910 and 9920. And it's a very important program, but it is also on hold while RYE is on hold as well. Okay, that's all I wanted to say about that. Okay. Okay, so the next stage of this is the other programs supported by district. Now, we support a lot of club-based programs. These are programs which various people have, or in some cases they might even be district programs, but they're not programs that district is intensely involved in. We don't have a team running the exercise. And there's a number of those that really do underpin the relationship that clubs have and that Rotary has with schools. So they're very important exercises. And so I just mentioned that to you. They're all mentioned in the booklet which comes out, which explains various things, and you can see some of them there. But I'm going to talk specifically about one of these courses, which is a new one, and it's up there called the Young Totara Award, which was new in 2020. Now, this is an award which nobody will be surprised to hear was brought up to to District 9920 by Aini Kwok from 9970. And it is all there identifying young adults under the age of 21, but fundamentally from schools, who have done a great thing in the community. And this was awarded the first time this year to a young lady from Barradine College. And Aini, I wonder if you're seeing as you're on here, would you like to talk briefly about the Young Totara Award?
Okay, so the Young Totara Award has been going on since about over 25 years from 9970. So it took us quite a while to get it across to 9920, which we did back in until September last year. So we awarded a young lady from Barradine, like Peter said, and she set up an organization called Second Steps. If those who don't know, it's about pre-loved shoes, recycling pre-loved shoes and handing out to the lower decile schools. So it's a worthwhile, this is another tool, once again, like I said, another product for you to take it to the community and to the school for them to nominate a student or someone in the community for a Young Totara Award. The bigger picture of the Young Totara Award that I have is that every clubs will nominate one Young Totara, and hopefully in years to come, in a few years to come, we will have one major big Young Totara Award. That is the vision that I have for what Young Totara should be. So it's kind of going to be a national award, not just for one district, should be for all the districts in New Zealand.
Thanks, Aini. Any questions about that? Okay. That's me. I'm done.
Right. Well done. Thank you, Peter. We'll see you again in a few slides' time.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to take it to Edith now, who will introduce the next couple of slides.
Kia ora. Thanks, Ursula, and thanks, Peter. As you can see, whānau, a really wide-ranging selection of programs for youth that 9920 has got a real focus on. And just reinforcing that commitment and relationship to ensure these programs continue is up to us and our relationships with those particular schools in our district and in our areas. So kia ora. If you could just go to the next slide, thank you, Ursula. Okay, one of those programs, well, it's not a program, is Interact, and I'd like to introduce Ainsley Campbell, who is the lead for this program. Thank you, Ainsley.
Just might need to unmute yourself there, Ainsley.
There we go.
Unmute, yep.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming on this slightly chilly but still sunny Sunday Father's Day. Interact, about building fun and fellowship for 12 to 18-year-olds. That's high school, year 9 to 13. Getting them used to the idea of citizenship and leadership, and what that can do for their lives and their careers going forward. Globally, there's over 300,000 interactors. There's close on 15,000 clubs in 145 countries. 9920 currently has 18. So we want to build on that with the next slide. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going really quick. Looking at chartering 5 new clubs in the coming year, which still doable with kids going to school. And I mean, COVID times, a lot of our fundraising activities have been so heavily curtailed, but using the Zoom format, why not go ahead with Interact clubs? That's me. Questions?
Can you perhaps distinguish Interact as opposed to, say, a program, a youth program, Ainsley? Because there is a difference.
It's linked to the clubs through the schools, so it's not just a program, it's its own entity.
So it's sort of like it's part of the Rotary Club, like there's Interact, there's Rotaract, there's Rotary, as opposed to being the other programs are underneath Rotary.
Yeah, well, I mean, well, ideally the hope, as somebody mentioned earlier on, that, you know, Rotarians are getting older, we need new people to learn what's going on. So at high school, if they get involved with what fellowship and leadership can do, they would then go on, become a Rotaractor, and then maybe later on in their lives become a Rotarian, is the hope. They'd follow through each stages as their life progresses.
Are there any sort of like data on how likely that progression has been or will be?
Don't know. I need to find out.
I can answer that, Ursula.
I thought you might, Craig.
Yes, we have a terrible record of
Yeah.
transferring interest in our youth programs to our senior programs, and we've got a strategy on how to deal with that. But the first part is to build on the work that George and Aini have done over the last 2 or 3 years, which has been acknowledged here by Peter Ross, and I just repeat Peter's acknowledgement. Aini, come home soon, because Wellington's a cold and soulless place full of grey bureaucrats. We'll look forward to seeing you then. But Interact, we've got the strongest group of Interact clubs in the 6 districts. And I'm just thrilled to see that Ainsley's taken up the challenge of, well, it's an impossible task, Ainsley, to follow on from Aini, but I know you'll do a wonderful job. So Interact is just key. We've got a project associated with Interact, which is reimagining the 4-way test competition and the studio in a box. And if anybody is interested in that, Taviuni, for instance, Ainsley, I haven't managed to catch up with you, but I don't know whether Taviuni's caught up with you, but they are going to form an Interact club, and it's all based on the Rotary Club supplying a studio and a box for the podcasts.
Excellent.
That's another whole subject. We're not going to go there today, but I just picking up on Ursula's comment. You know, we've done a great job, courtesy of the work that's been done before us, particularly by Aini and George, on Interact. Now we need to actually ensure that we pipeline those people through to Rotaract or RYLA or the other Rotary programs.
Okay, thank you, Craig. We're just in the minute of time here, so I'm going to forward to the next slide. Thank you, Ainsley.
Thank you, Ursula. Thank you, Craig.
And the pipeline begins not in the cradle, but just about at primary schools. So Irina, we're going to hand this over to you.
Okay, kia ora everyone. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. No mai, haere mai. Ko Irina Huia Giles, toko ingoa. Currently a Half Moon Bay Rotarian. Now, I was given this project called Rota Kids, which is a passion because they are the up and coming generation. And why do we have Rota Kids? Young people are citizens of today, not citizens in waiting. Rota Kids supports our younger citizens to develop the strength, knowledge, skills, enthusiasm, and determination to keep on finding ways to change the world, locally and globally, into a more peaceful place where people can enjoy their lives. This project is working alongside our primary schools. So the thing is, the children are between the ages of 7 and 12 years old, and they actually learn all sorts of things. They form their own club, as such, their own members for these for the students. They have a leader, they have a secretary, They are given the guidance through a teacher who's actually in the primary school, and so they work alongside. What the Rotary kids learn is commitment, decision-making, citizenship, friendship, leadership, responsibility, caring, respect, compassion, and much, much more. They start off with little activities that they do, and internationally they can connect with Rotary functions, like, for example, our emergency response kits, and that's through fundraising. And they will pick up a fundraiser. It may be like they go out and the school will all dress up with a purple ribbon, and they will start to raise money. That could go to the Earth Boxes, Ending Polio. They may go in as a group to pick up litter around our beach fronts. And so it's all to do, and then Trees for Survival, they go in and they help plant the trees. So that's basically what the Rotary Kids are all about. I am very, very excited about working alongside the schools and the teachers to give these children the opportunity to give back to our community. Because as Rotarians, we all give, you know, the dictionary books, we give them to these schools. So now it's time for them to give back in exchange. So that's just a very small sort of look in on Rotary Kids. And when they do start and become part of this program, they do a recite, and it goes as a Rotary Kid, I endeavour to be fair to all, to serve my community and to show respect for others. So, you know, that is, I know this is from the primary school level, but we're starting there and we're planting the seeds. It's like we go out and we plant trees. Well, we're doing the same with these children. So they are our up and coming. They're our up and coming for our environments. So
good, Irina. Thank you. He kākono he rangiati me. So the seeds of our ancestors being planted for the future. Kia ora whanau.
Exactly.
Thank you. I think we're on a break time, Ursula, and we are running 12 minutes late, whanau. So we're going to have a short break because I'm sure everyone needs to just stretch their legs. And then the final part of the presentation will be on the Rotary Pacific and Rotary clubs. And I know that our island whānau that are in the space, this will be particularly relevant for you. And there's some key points that I know Peter and Stuart Littlejohn would like to get across so that we're preloading for the event of our borders opening up with our Pacific Island cousins. So have a short break. I'm suggesting 2 to 3 minutes. Oh, well, you've got 5 up, Ursula. You're
Well, I'm just thinking time to boil the kettle, that's all.
Okay, okay. 5, but I'll be back here at 3, ready to start. Kia ora whanau. Lovely to hear all the chatting. And America, that sounds like some amazing activities you're doing there. So yes, we will all keep in touch with you. So, moving right along. Last part, whanau, you have done so well. And we're into Rotary Pacific and Rotaract. So over to you, Ursula.
Sorry, there I am. Lovely. Thank you. Right, so the next section, if I can get the clicker going, we're starting with the young adults program. This is the second part here. And I'd just like you to think, just as we're going through, you don't have to answer this now, but just to think of some of the challenges that your club may have come across in supporting these young adult programs. It's not always smooth sailing, and just to acknowledge that. So if you have, just have a little think, and perhaps as a group we can, you know, other people might have some solutions to some of those challenges that you've experienced. And as we're going, as Peter goes through with these, and Stuart with these next couple of slides, feel free to bring up some of those queries or examples as we go. So Peter, I'd like to welcome you back into the space and start off on this slide here about RYLA.
Okay, well, most of you here will probably know about RYLA. It's a fairly well-known program. It's been going for a long, long time. There's the summary of it there. We had to cancel it this year, as we had to cancel most things because of this pandemic. But fundamentally, that's what it is. It's 120 people from a very diverse group of applicants. And so we're going to move on pretty quickly now. I don't need to dwell on it, but if people want to ask me questions about RYLA, I'm more than happy to answer them. But on the next slide, I'm going to go through this actually piece by piece quite quickly because it's quite important. Because this is the one of the programs where Rotary clubs have to be involved. You have to get involved with this one or it doesn't happen. So the first thing you've got to do is appoint a team to manage the interviews and the interface with the RYLA operations. That means you need a Rotary club-based team. You need to identify the suitable candidates for the event. Now, that's a challenge, and if you come to some of the RYLA sessions, which will be in November this year, we will tell you how to find them, and we'll give you a lot of detail on how to do that. So it's worthwhile making sure that your club person who's responsible for RYLA and or youth programs comes along to those events. You can identify companies that may be prepared to sponsor, and in fact, just for your information, more than 50% of the RYLA attendees, of which there are 120, more than 50% are sponsored by companies. Companies pay the fee. And if you're going to be involved with a company, you need to manage the relationships. Once again, the relationships are key with the companies involved. The budget is there, $975 plus GST, hasn't changed for a few years. So we're holding on to that for as long as we can. All participants, this is a key part too, all participants get interviewed by your Rotary Club. You must interview your participants. Even if a corporate, the BNZ sends you 4 candidates, you must still do the interviews. That's part of the deal because we want these candidates, even though they come from a corporate, to understand they're engaging with RYLA. The difference with this and a lot of other ones we do, we're dealing with young adults. They get it, all right? They understand what's going on and they're pretty sharp. You've then got to deliver the candidates and collect them from RYLA. This is, literally deliver them. Pick them up in the car and deliver them. That's part and parcel of the exercise. We don't want people at RYLA with cars. We don't want them with cell phones either, but the cars are a different one. We want them to have a club representative at the graduation dinner. If some of you have been to the graduation dinners, you'll know what that looks like. It's very important that the club people know what happened and they understand the benefits so they can take it back to the club and keep the ball rolling. This is the next one is very, very important. Organise your participants to come back to a Rotary meeting and to present on their experience. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever been to or know of the events that are run by Downtown and Newmarket are the particular ones. They are grand events. They are big events. And there are a lot of people at those events. So they really hype everything up big time. And then this is the bit we don't do very well. Follow up with the participants and keep them engaged with club activities as long as possible. Now, because we haven't done that very well, that is where the RIPEN connection comes in. So Aini Kwok actually recruits those Rylarians to help her go and run RIPEN. And in actual fact, I think it's fair to say she is oversubscribed. She'll get more people wanting to do that than actually she's got spaces for. And that's a very, very important part of the equation because after they've done RIPEN, we want them to come back and help us run RYLA. So it's a circular event. So that's basically how RYLA runs. But now we're going to move on. Oh, sorry. Has anybody got any questions about that?
Many questions. We've just got a couple of comments just about how we invite all RYLA applicants to join us before the application deadline for test presentations. We invited someone who's chosen to go to meet us for a send-off and then invite the delegates back to share their experience with us. That's really cool.
Okay.
And then just some comments on how great the celebration dinner is at the end.
Okay, we can move on to the next one then.
Yep.
Cool. Right, now we're going to talk about Rota Pacific. And really, Stuart Littlejohn, I notice, is here. And America, we're very pleased to see you because Stuart and I have had a number of discussions with you in the past. And we have to say that we have been very impressed with the improving quality of candidate that has been coming out of Fiji, which we actually largely thought you were responsible for. So that's our accolade for you. And so we really enjoyed working with you. But first of all, Stuart, would you like to talk briefly about the Rota Pacific program?
Can I just, sorry, pause you there. We've got one, just to go back, we've got one comment about RYLA that someone's wanting to explain what it is and the cost and the commitments. So
okay, what it
some
is?
Of those.
It's what it's. I'm sorry. It's a 1 week live-in experiential leadership course. It's all about team leadership, not necessarily individual leadership. It's run at Willow Park. It has, as an experiential part, it has a part where we bring the New Zealand Army in and they help us run a part of the exercise, which is what some people would refer to as a stress test. So can you operate under stress as a leader? And it runs, as I say, it runs for a week. It's for 20 to 28-year-olds. And it costs $975 plus GST. And fundamentally, that's it. We have lots of different speakers. We have lots of different engagement. And we're always looking to improve it. There you go. Any more comments you want to
Lovely.
make?
That's a good summary. Perfect, he says. Thank you.
Okay. Stuart.
Thank you, Peter. And hello, America. Very pleased to meet you at long last. I guess the Rota Pacific program is intended to ensure that there is participation by our Pacific Island district members in RYLA, and acknowledging that it's more awkward for them to attend. And the Rota Pacific program is a 2-week course. The first week is involved in Rotary and vocational aspects, and the second week is RYLA, of course. So the ideal candidate that we're looking for is someone in the workforce, as distinct from a university student, someone who's displayed leadership qualities, and someone who's able to be mentally and physically challenged in the course of the week. So that for Rota Pacific nominations and awardees, that means that the candidate has to be able to have 2 weeks in Auckland. During the first week, they're billeted with Rotarians, and there are some Rotary functions and vocational activities to attend, and learning a little bit about what's involved in living in Auckland. And the second week is RYLA. The costs for the nominating clubs or the Pacific Island clubs are the travel expenses to come to Auckland, any visa costs if visas are necessary, and insurance. And at this end, the Auckland clubs are responsible for payment of the RYLA, the fee, the $975 that Peter's just talked about, as well as billeting the awardees and hosting them in that first week. The expenses also include to gearing up our Pacific Island friends who often arrive with their jandals and a light shirt and a pair of shorts, and that's great for where they normally reside. Not so good in Auckland in winter. So we ensure that they are adequately equipped for the Ryla week, part of which does include some outdoor activities. What more can I add? I guess the nomination process, that's really over to the local clubs to identify suitable candidates, interview them. Rotaractors have formed a significant part of the nominations, and I guess we in Auckland here rely on the recommendations of the nominating club as to how they view their candidate. And I guess if I could just add that America has generated a lot of nominations from Fiji in recent years, but their interview process is very rigorous and thorough, and has just been a huge advantage to those of us in Auckland trying to confirm the final nomination. So America, thank you for your involvement over the last couple of years. That's been fantastic, and certainly I hope that it continues.
Can I just add something here, Stuart, if I may? With Rota Pacific, we have decided that we are limiting the number of Rota Pacific people who can attend here to the number of 6. And people ask me, why is 6? Well, when we billet them for the first week, 6 is a relatively straightforward number for billeting and taking to faraway places, particularly educational places like there's a place just outside of Matamata, which is very educational. They like to go to. So you all know what that is. And so there's so the billeting exercise limits us to 6. Therefore, we have 6 that go on to Rana. What we also want to explain to the people in the islands, though, is if, and this is particularly relevant to Fiji, if you found a corporate in Fiji that wanted to sponsor a student to go to Ryla, then that is quite possible. I mean, you could have 6 people going to Rota Pacific, and we could have another additional person just attending Ryla, sponsored just exactly the same as any other club in this district can do. The only special consideration we have is the 6 places for Rota Pacific, but if you wanted to sponsor another person, that's fine, but that would just be for Ryla, okay? And that's a decision we've made from a point of view of logistics. And the costs are all down there, and the details are there. But what we also decided, I'm not sure whether we should have decided this, but we did, was that of the 6, we would have, I think it was 2 from Fiji, 1 from Rarotonga, 1 from Tahiti, and 1 from Samoa. We've never had anybody from Kiribati, so I don't know what the story would be there. And so we allow those clubs to go in those places to find that person. If, however, Samoa don't find anybody for their particular slot, we will reallocate that to most likely Fiji. So what America has done, and others have done as well, is they rank their candidates. So they rank their candidates 1 to 4, and we'll take the first 2 from Fiji, and if somebody else pulls out or doesn't take their slot, we'll put another one in from Fiji or from somewhere else, because Tahiti may decide to put in 2, and Rarotonga has on occasions put in 2 as well. But those are the limitations that we face. Are you okay with that, Stuart? Did I explain that properly?
Better than I could have done myself, Peter.
We've just got to clarify a question that's come into the chat, asking if American Samoa can come to this as well, to apply for Rota Pacific.
Sorry?
We've got a question in the chat about whether American Samoa applies for Rota Pacific as well, if they can put in an application.
I see. Are they? Well, I'm going to ask all the district governor bods that are on this thing. Is that they're part of the exercise? Are they part of the district? If they're part of the district, then they can definitely put one in.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and yep, no. Samoa includes American and Western Samoa, correct? From the Barron family.
Well, then that's not a problem. I don't have any issue. I mean, to be quite candid with you, if we go back over a number of years, we've seen a lot of candidates coming out of Fiji. We've seen the odd one coming out of Rarotonga and Tahiti. If I go back about 5 years, I think we've seen one out of Samoa. And so, you know, we're very keen. In fact, we went to a lot of lengths to try and get more out of those places. But Stuart will no doubt back this up. Our communication path into those places has been at best woeful.
Stuart, if you make contact with me, I've got two great ladies who sit, one sits in Fiji and one sits in Kiribati, who would certainly help in terms of the process you want if you're looking for more people to be involved.
Actually, Alan, we've actually got limited spaces. Just make that clear right from the get-go. But we're very happy to have a spread. Don't get me wrong. Very happy to have a spread. Happy to have as many people in the loop as possible, as long as they all understand that we can't get them all on if they all stick their hand up.
Yeah, I agree with you, Peter. But I think that people like in America, Samoa, and Kiribati need to have the belief that if they have a great candidate, they can go through the process.
Absolutely.
At least.
Yeah, very happy to do that. In fact, what also happens, I should say, is that when we get these applications, and Stuart and I will often sit down and we'll have a phone call through, particularly we had a phone calls on a number of occasions to America and into Tahiti and to Rarotonga. So we'll actually have a phone call and we will go through almost line by line on their applications to make sure that they do fit our criteria. We have had to do much less with America because she's so much more tuned into the exercise, but some other parties in the islands are not so well tuned in, so we've got to explain a lot of detail.
Right.
Yeah, I think the limitation on the program really is from the Auckland end. We need the support and buy-in of the Auckland clubs, and they're asked to contribute to it. So there's a physical limitation of 6 in terms of hosting, billeting, and transportation, but there's a financial implication as well, and that's where they really need the buy-in of the Auckland clubs. But that is a real limitation on just how far the program can be extended. But we would love to see, plenty of candidates.
We have a great deal of trouble getting funding out of some of the Auckland-based Rotary clubs, and we're not asking for a lot. If every Auckland-based Rotary club gave us, $300 to $500, we would get there, wouldn't we, Stuart?
Absolutely, yeah. If every club gave $500, we'd be home and host.
Yeah, but that's uncommon, I have to tell you. Anyway, I think unless anybody got any more, I see that we've got a comment here from, who's that from?
That's from America, just talking about the process that they go through for applications.
Yeah.
Saying that they have a strong emphasis on community engagement.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just coming in at 5:35, Whānau. No, that our session was
I think we're finished now. I think we're finished now, Edith. But thank you very much, America. We do appreciate what you do, and we'd like to see it. All the other places picking up the same processes. Thanks very much. I'm signing off.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. We really appreciate your korero today and taking us through those processes and those programs. Thank you very much.
I'm wondering if I could ask Becky for the next slide and introduction, please. Ursula.
Ursula, not me.
Becky, yep. Did you want to introduce the next slide, or?
Yeah, and just bring the next slide up. Here we go.
Okay, so go for it.
Go for it, Ursula.
Okay, so we'll introduce Sean, who's coming on here now to talk about Rotaract and is going to give us a bit of insight into how Rotaract links in with youth programs. there you go away with you, Sean.
Hey everyone, hopefully you all can hear me. I'm Sean Peacock. I'm the president of Rotaract Club of Auckland City. As most of you probably know, from the Council of Legislation last year, the Rotaract is no longer a program. We've left the youth programs and we're now a type of youth club, which means that we're going to sit on all the district community. Well, we're coming to take all of your members. No, we're going to sit on we can sit on district committees and all that sort of jazz. And in addition, the RI board has decided that Rotaract clubs can raise or eliminate their age ceiling, which previously was 30, and now we can increase it. I believe the proposal for our club is to basically say new members can be under 30 and moving, but you can stay in as long as you like. Yeah, so yeah. Yeah, okay, we'll move on to the next slide, Ursula. That was really all I wanted to say about that part.
Okay.
So then what can Rotaract do for your club? The first thing, as Peter said, Rotary is not very good at keeping their alumni in the Rotary family. And I'm not really sure why alumni feel that way. I might suggest that it's because you come along to a dinner meeting or something like that with people who are significantly older than you, and so
catch up with some.
Yeah. So, but anyway, what can we do? We can provide a setting for everyone to, for basically a place for Rotary alumni to come together with people their own age and hang out and slowly funnel them into our Rotary family. And then the second thing we can do is provide a pipeline for younger members. We bring us up, get them in a club that's relatively low cost and with people their own age. And then as they get older and their needs and their means change, then they can be slowly funneled into Rotary clubs. So that's what I feel we can do for you guys.
All right. Any comment from anybody else on that? Becky, any?
Oh, yes, probably. I should probably have something to say in here as chair. Yes, Rotaract allows us to have a club type that basically allows for a lot more flexibility than a traditional Rotary club. Being a part of a Rotaract club tends to be a little bit more active with our projects. We tend to do a lot more social things. We're very much about providing leadership for our generation as well. So we spend a lot of time around leadership training. We get actively involved in things like leading RIPEN and RILA, and there's a lot of opportunities for us to work on slightly different projects. We get leadership opportunities at a younger age as opposed to coming into a Rotary club where we would have to work quite hard to get those experiences. And it's just a different sort of atmosphere. So it's something that we're pushing quite hard in our district, and Craig has been wonderful with helping us get that off the ground here. And so if anyone wants to talk about starting a Rotaract club, please feel free to reach out to me as chair or the district Rotaract representative-elect, Sean, who was just speaking. Would be happy to answer your questions. Also, I'll just note that Sean is now also holding a position on the new multi-district information organization, which has been started between 9920 and 9940. This is a very new concept. It's not one I'll go into detail about here, but it is something that's allowing us to provide leadership training and information on club management to our Rotaractors that hasn't been available before, and was chartered in February this year, which I'm chairing currently. And it's something that Rotarians will be able to contact as well if they want To find out more about Rotaract in our area, some of the projects that we're working on, or if you're interested in starting a club, or just coming to a meeting or having one of us come and speak at your meetings.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you to you, Becky, and to Sean. That was really great to have you guys in this space and to talk around Rotaract.
Can I just make a couple of comments, Ursula?
Yeah.
I think that it's worthwhile noting that for the last few years, we haven't really treated Rotaract as a program. We've had the Rotaractors involved with the youth environment because that's how they get the projects. That's how they get involved in the projects. So I think it's very worthwhile Rotaractors making sure that they are represented in the youth space, not because they're a program, but because that's how they connect to the people that are running Raipen and Moona and Ryla and all those types of things. And that way they're part of the discussion that takes place when we're talking about how we're going to plan or vary or change the way that we deliver these programs. So we think it's very valuable that they're involved, but we don't treat them as a program. We treat them as a partner. I just think it's worthwhile noting that for the record.
That's a really good point, Peter. And I'd just like to reinforce that both Becky and Sean, are also now on the Leadership Development Committee, which I'm chairing for the district. And they have been impacting in ways that, we feed off them as they feed off us. So it's a great partnership, as you've just said. Sure.
And I'd just like to make one last remark on that, Peter. Yes, we are doing this really well in our district. And I'd like for all of our district to be aware of the fact that I was at an MDIO meeting last night where it became very apparent that we are one of the few districts that has Rotaract that is actively working to engage Rotaractors on all of our district committees, because this is something that's come up on all the MDIO level around the world, which represents almost all of the 250,000 Rotaractors around the world. And we're one of the very few districts that are actively putting people in positions like the one that I hold in our district as the Rotaract chair. So to our DG Train, thank you very much for giving the Rotaractors that sort of opportunity, because we're apparently leading the way with that. So thanks, Craig.
Okay.
We've only just started. Just to finish off on that, I think just for everybody's benefit, they need to take on board that this is a key RI initiative. Rotaract clubs, as you've heard from Sean, no longer have an age group. In fact, actually, Sean, since that last communication, the new constitution now doesn't have an age limit in it at all, and you're required to adopt it without amendment. So essentially, age limits are going to go. So that's number one. Number two, there's been a number of decisions by the RI board, and including, most importantly, I mean, there's Rotaractors are going to be paying RI levies in 18 months' time. But also Rotaract clubs are now able to initiate global grants, and all district governors are being asked to ensure that there's proper representation of Rotaract on district committees. So thank you, Becky and Sean, for the work that you're doing to ensure that we can meet that goal. Rotaract is a different culture, different price point, and it is seen by Rotary as a way of addressing the age demographics problem that we've got in traditional Rotary clubs. So form a Rotaract club alongside you. Don't form a satellite club. Don't form a new generation club. Form a Rotaract club, and you've got that different culture, price point, but all the capabilities. So we're really looking forward to having a great year with Rotaract. No pressure, Becky and Sean.
Yeah.
Right. Ainsley's put a stake in the ground, so I'm looking for a bigger number from you guys.
All right, I'm going to thank you, Craig, and Sean, Becky, and Ainsley. I'm going to just move us forward to the next section. Now, for those of you who need to shoot off because of Father's Day dinner, absolutely do that if you need. The formal part of the presentation has finished, and just to reiterate, there are those handouts that that Edith spoke to earlier if you need more information, and to go onto the Learning Centre modules as well. For those of you who are happy to stay on, we would like to have a little bit of a breakout session. This is a bit of a practice for us as well, so we're wanting to just have a couple of minutes of your time to reflect a little bit on your learnings today, and what you've taken out. So I've got two questions here. What is your club proud of achieving with regards to supporting youth programs? So what is your club proud of? And what are you inspired to take back to your club to action from today's session? So anything that you have thought might be new, or something that you're motivated now having heard about, that you're wanting to get your clubs invested in. So yeah, how are we going with that? John, are you able to
we're having people rapidly leaving the meeting, so
yes, I see that, which is fine, because
I'm just wondering whether it's worth doing breakouts at this point, or whether people just want to throw in.
Yeah, maybe if we just stay in the space, and if anyone else wants to comment, because great idea and great practice for us, but yes, the people have left the space.
Yeah, it's just if I assign people to breakout rooms as they're leaving, we're going to end up with one person in a breakout room with themselves for company, and I think that's not very good.
So any final comments, and then we'll do a wrap up of thanks from Beryl on behalf of our team. Thank you.
Could I make a comment on to Craig on the school podcast competition, and is there going to be a general information sharing session on that, so that as I see the beginnings of that as a very important link to forming Interact in the schools?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
If I put on my ROSOPS hat for a moment, I'm sitting on the committee, the national committee that's doing this project. And yes, that's something that we will be looking at doing, but it will be something we will have an information night. We haven't decided as a committee whether it'll be to each individual district or to just a general invite out to people to join us for a single information session. But there's also information available. There is a document on this project that will be made more readily available to people soon.
Thank you.
Alan.
Edith, if I can make a comment in support of Hope's presentation, in the world of technology today, we're seeing new things and experiencing new things. And this last week I was homeschooling my young grandson, and all of a sudden we were witness to a young child being disciplined by the father. He was a vulnerable child, and unfortunately that forced obligations on several people to deal with that. So don't underestimate the youth protection position in today's world, because it is really important that people understand their obligations. And it's common sense, but it's surprising when it happens, just for your information.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for bringing that back to the reality for us. Any other comments, Whānau?
So how do we get all clubs to get their arms around the youth protection training as a basic step, even if they won't necessarily all read the full youth protection policy? How do we get presidents to take the responsibility for their Rotarians' sake, as much as the children's?
That's a really good question, George, and I think it's just a matter of opening. It's like taking the horse to water, and there are online education programs that are available. Craig has done a lot of work in updating the youth policy alongside Hope to make it more New Zealand orientated in terms of the rules and participation. And I think it's it's about awareness, and about when people have an event involving young people or vulnerable adults, And I've dealt with vulnerable adults over the last 20 years within the disability world. You've got to understand that they work in a different cultural world and have different expectations, and common sense prevails, but our clubs and the rotation of presidents doesn't help, but we have to make sure that our clubs are aware of what that obligation is, George.
Yeah, it's just actually converting it into action at club level. That's what I've had difficulty with. We recently tried to get all youth directors in the last Rotary year to go through the program, and many did, and I've got them recorded. But we need to keep the pressure on, and I think it has to be done through the presidents of the club, because through the president, they are responsible to the DG for ensuring that at the very minimum, our Rotarians should be doing the youth protection training.
You're talking about the module, George?
The one module. I mean, if I could be terrible and say, hey, they really need to do also the addressing the harassment one, which sits alongside it. And both of those programs, I think, should be mandatory for all Rotarians, not just youth, but all.
I absolutely agree with you, George. And it should not just be the president, but it should be the officers of the club, because they are all, as a collective group, responsible for the actions of the club and what arise from it. I don't know if Craig has a different view.
I usually tell people that it protects them as well as protecting the youth, because you can get youth that will accuse you of doing something that you don't think is improper, but they do. So it's about as much protection for Rotarians as it is for youth, and that's where I think the key message is. It's your protection as well as theirs.
I agree with you, Lisa.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm just going to wind it up there, Whānau, because it's 5:53, and I'm just going to hand over to, and George, perhaps you can get in touch with our team, and we'd be happy to put something together that perhaps is around President-elect, certainly, and any other opportunities for leadership development and learning and development across the district. So can always set up these sorts of sessions as a district.
Be great, thank you.
Okay. Beryl.
Thanks, Edith. On behalf of our district learning and development team of Edith, Ursula, Becky, Sean, Malini and myself, and of course John on IT, thank you so much John for being enabling it all to happen today. We'd first of all like to thank our presenters. Today we've heard from Craig, Peter Ross, Hope, Aini, Peter Buchanan, George, Ainsley, Irina, Stuart, Sean and Becky. So let's give them all a big round of applause. And of course, thank you to everyone for being involved today. It has been really interactive and it's been a very useful and informative session. So thank you one and all. Of course, we never miss an opportunity to promote our upcoming learning and development opportunities for Rotarians and Rotaractors. Firstly, our next Rotary Leadership Institute, or RLI, weekend, which includes part 1 and part 2 and part 3 modules, is on the 31st of October and the 1st of November. And in that weekend, the modules include things like membership, public image, communication, team building, leadership, strategic planning, Rotary Foundation, creating service projects and more modules. It's a fun, interactive weekend. Plus, on the Sunday, for those that have already done parts 1, 2 and 3, the RLI graduates, we have a seminar that we offer once a year that Ingrid and I usually take, and that's on the Sunday, the 1st of November. And that's a whole step up. It is even more interactive and discussion based, and it focuses on becoming an extraordinary Rotarian or Rotaractor. And that's always a fun seminar. We're aiming at face-to-face at Selwyn College in Kohimaramara in Auckland, fingers crossed. I guess plan B will be Zoom. Second opportunity is for all our presidents-elect across our district. Our presidents-elect development seminar will be on the 15th of November. That's 1-5 November in the afternoon from 1 till 5 p.m. New Zealand time. So they will be promoted and you will get more about it. But if you at least diary those 2 weekends, fantastic upcoming opportunities for learning and development. Thanks, team.
Thanks, Beryl. And final word is you, Craig, and it's 5:56.
I've got my
I'm needing a wine.
I've already got mine, George. You know me better than that.
Mate wa, so
Good on you, Lisa.
bye for now. See you later. It was wonderful. Thank you very much to everybody who was on this call. It's just been a wonderful afternoon seeing you all and hearing from you all. So bye for now.
And if you'd like to stay on for a wai, a kai and a kōrero, please do. And if the committee could just stay on for our final wrap up. Ka kite anō, see you all again.
Thank you.
I'll just get Steve on the wine.
Will I just stop recording now?
Yes, thank you.